Howdy Kiddos, welcome back to our Playdate. My name is AOK, I'll be your host today. Today we're going to be taking a look at Resident Evil Revelations 2. I'm here to answer the tough questions like, is this game any fun? Is it worth your hard-earned allowance? And finally, where does this Resident Evil rank amongst the others in the series? Well, all that and mucho más on this edition of AOK Playdate. Long ago, in a land far, far away, I played Resident Evil, the director's cut on my PlayStation 1 system. There was one room in particular that I was incredibly fond of, where I grabbed the shotgun from one room only to return to the last room I just came from. There, I was crushed mercilessly by the ceiling. Many times. Over and over again. It took me a massive amount of squishes before I realized I shouldn't do that, which would explain all the times my paperclip lost to the electrical socket from my childhood. In fact, my mother would never really punish me because she knew I'd just end up doing it to myself eventually anyways. As long as she remembered the numbers 911, I would grow up one day to play video games, post my thoughts to the interwebs, and share them with you. Precious memories aside, I have found myself purchasing every major Resident Evil release since that day. Of course, I don't mean the handheld games, railgun shooters, or that god-awful Operation Raccoon City. Now comes a Resident Evil game that has piqued my interest, and it harkens back to that original game. That's right, boys and girls, it's the return of the Magnum Python slinging Redbeard alpha dog, Barry Burton. Barry is an intriguing character to me because in the Resident Evil remake, originally released on the GameCube and later as an HD re-release on multiple platforms, you can kill off Barry during a boss encounter. I always found myself wondering how is it possible for him to still be alive? In Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, he pilots the helicopter for Jill and Carlos to get out of Raccoon City just before its destruction. This is a problem that Resident Evil has with multiple scenarios that can happen based upon your decisions earlier in the game. It was a cool premise back in the 90s, but now the creators must be allergic to continuity or else have Michael Bay as a consultant. Either or, he's back and is without a doubt the best part of this game. He has two children, one of which is a key protagonist in this game. No, that's not your eyes deceiving you, that's really Dante from DMC Devil May Cry. I love the fact that Capcom has crossed over its characters into its other games. It's really cool.
Actually, it's not. It's Moira Burton, Barry Burton's daughter.
I'm sorry, what's that?
It's Barry Burton's daughter. It's not Dante. It's really Moira Burton.
It's not Dante.
It's Moira Burton, Terry Burton's daughter.
Well, it sure looks like Dante.
It's not Dante. Trust me, it's Barry Burton's daughter, Moira.
At least maybe one of Dante's obsessive lookalike diehard fans, right?
Would you just listen to me? It's Moira Burton.
Moira?
Yes, Moira Burton. It's the race.
The character's name is Moira.
Yes, Moira Burton. It's Barry Burton's daughter.
Alright, whatever you say.
Asshole.
Anyways, Moira is paired with none other than Claire Redfield. Yes, the same Claire Redfield that appeared in both Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil Code Veronica. These ladies are kidnapped from a company party by a team of SWAT-looking guys in full tactical gear, which always seems like a little bit of overkill when you're just kidnapping a couple friends trying to have some drinks at a company party, and they're not even packing heat. But it gives Capcom a reason to use their infamous slow-motion, broken glass reflection spinny move that you no doubt remember from the Resident Evil movies. If you ever bothered to watch those. Don't do it. After the abduction, they take the ladies to a prison on a remote island owned by a villainess with a love for literature, candles, and creepy-ass effigies. This self-proclaimed overseer is menacing at first, and she injects them both with a virus. That's right, Resident Evil fans, it's the old Resident Evil virus plotline that sends our set of heroines on their way. This particular virus does eventually cause the victim to mutate, but only after they succumb to an immense amount of fear. Both Claire and Moira have been placed in bracelets that are color-coded. The colors represent the stages of the virus level in the subject. Green means you're normal, orange means you're feeling anxiety, blinking red means you're succumbing to fear, and solid red means you're fucked. Without giving too much detail, the two have to escape the prison blocks and eventually track down their captor. The game itself is split into 4 separate episodes, with 2 bonus episodes helping to fill out some of the plot holes. These are your typical Resident Evil Swiss cheese plot holes that involve a bad person with a confusing plan that intends to do bad things with that confusing plan. The virus is just a part of the puzzle, though. The actual intentions of the villain are different, but similarly confusing and completely over the top. Shortly after Claire and Moira escape the prison blocks, they get to a radio tower and send an SOS. Sometime after that transmission, Big Papa Burton comes to the island and docks his boat, only to find a small girl standing on the docks. In her pajamas. Just staring at him. Creepy as hell little girl stares aside. Her name is Natalia Corda. After a short conversation with her, Barry reluctantly agrees to allow her to tag along. Together they set off to find Moira and figure out why the hell there's a little girl just traipsing around the island in her pajamas with little to no memory of what just happened to her. Now we have our setup. Claire and Moira lead and Barry and Natalia follow sometime after. The best thing about this game, or as I like to call it, the big ups, if you couldn't tell by my swooning, is Barry Burton. For the first 2 episodes, Barry is a step behind and goes over the same exact path as the ladies with slight differentiations. It comes off as boring in comparison to Claire's first 2 episodes. However, there is a shift after the second episode where we witness Barry's compassion as a father over both Moira and Natalia, and this becomes the driving force for the rest of the story. At this point, Claire takes a backseat to Barry and is essentially a person who holds a gun and shoots whatever monster is in front of her. There's some small plotline at the end of episode 3 that you will see coming from a mile away, and because of its obviousness, it comes off as being been there, done that, and loses any shock that Capcom hoped that it would originally have. Considering this is a big moment of Claire's story in the game, I only have one question. Why is Claire in this game? Her inclusion in Resident Evil Revelations 2 feels forced. Like the writer said,
"Well, we've used up the majority of the cast in Resident Evil 6. We used up Jill in Resident Evil Revelations 1. Who's left?"
Then another writer stands up poignantly and shouts,
"Billy Burton and Claire Redfield."
The conference room cheers in adoration as one other writer says, "But why Claire?" And then everyone sits down, slowly, silently, and then crickets. You know what's funny about that is Capcom is obviously a Japanese company, and I believe they're all old waspy white British dudes who are arguing over the game in their writer's room. Maybe they are. I doubt it, though. Anyways, let me explain, without spoiling it. When you find out who the new villain is, fans of the Resident Evil series will automatically make the connection from Claire to the villain in no time at all. You will say, "I know exactly what's going on here, and I'm sure of it." However, Capcom never makes this connection. The most obvious connection in the entire Resident Evil universe. Not even hinted at. Not even once. So if she's not connected to the villain like we all know she should be, then her purpose must revolve around Barry and Moira, right? Well, she knows Barry, but it isn't really explained throughout the entire game as to how close they are. And Moira? Well, she just looks up to Claire and calls her a friend. Taylor Swift has an entire armada of fans who do that. But does Claire's friendship mean she has to be included in this story? Couldn't you have focused on Barry, Moira, and Natalia for the entire story? Their portions of this story were surely more interesting than anything Claire was given, and it would have allowed for more backstory to be given into Barry's entire family, as well as what's been going on with him since the events of Resident Evil 1 and 3. But the worst part, and I'd like to call this the Debbie Downer part, of Claire's story is the ending to her portion of Episode 4, Metamorphosis. The writers force Claire into a decision. Strike that, actually. There is no decision about it. The writers force Claire into a situation that paints her in an absolutely terrible light, and forces the player to push the button, making you feel the weight of it all. However, in the bonus episode, The Struggle, you are shown that the situation was pointless in the end, and overall becomes a moot point, and thus makes you wonder what was the point of the damn thing in the first place. Sure, Claire can't tell the future and what's going to happen, but why did the writers decide to go this route? There were many other ways you could have added emotion to the situation instead of just forcing the player into an unwinnable QuickTime event. But let's go back to the backstory for a bit. The villain in this game needs a ton more of it. The villain is an integral part to the Resident Evil lore, and her role in this game is just a setup to a sequel. That's great for the next game, but if you would have cut out or replaced Claire, or I don't know, made the game longer than 8 freaking hours, maybe you could have included some more necessary backstory on the villain. You could say, well, AOK, you had tons of backstory in the many journals littered around this game, and all you had to do was freaking read, you lazy illiterate smartass. Okay, 1, rude. Number 2, if you are a game where you have to read everything instead of experiencing it, maybe you should go try Pillars of Eternity. It's freaking awesome, by the way. If you were going to use the journal defense, I have a counter defense for you. Claire's part in episode 4. You enter a room that belongs to the villain, and there are literally 4 of these journals just kind of scattered about. In fact, there's 2 on the freaking coffee table, just open. So even the maintenance man can come in and see what diabolical thoughts this woman is thinking. I mean, it comes off as kind of lazy. Most of said journals also carry very important information that should have been explained much earlier in the story, instead of all just left for episode 4. Like, at least pull it back to episode 3 or something. You know, spread them out a bit. Also, for my final point about the overabundant amount of journals in this game, When has Resident Evil ever shied away from flashy cutscenes and flashbacks? You might think it's refreshing considering all those Michael Bay-esque action sequences of recent Resident Evil games, but I find it misplaced here, as you could have easily had both reading and visual storytelling. I feel like I'm being overly negative, so let's liven it up a little bit. Raid mode returns from the first Revelations, and it is a welcome addition to add replayability to this game, outside of your normal second playthrough that is. Even though it is enjoyable, it does lose its luster over the time. First of all, the way raid mode works is that you select a mission from one of 3 difficulty tiers. These tiered missions are simple. Kill all the enemies before the time runs out and break a golden emblem to finish it all up. The time limitations are very generous, so time is really never of any consequence. The missions themselves are pretty easy, and each mission gives you money to spend at the store on the mission hub. However, you eventually get so much money that you can just buy the biggest and the baddest weapon that matches your level. This allows you to mow down any enemy in your way, making the experience far less challenging. On another positive note, there are a multitude of different characters you can play as, from past to present, including cast from Resident Evil Revelations 2, as well as a few old favorites, like Albert Wesker and Hunk. These characters have their own unique special abilities. However, when you max out the level of these abilities, you can inherit them to the other characters, and they can learn them as well. This makes the special abilities not so special anymore. So why would you level up the other characters in the exact same way you just spent hours doing with another character? It gets repetitive, and I stopped after I played Barry Burton and he hit level 35. Also, if you do the daily quests, which you totally should because they give you the most experience by far, you will outpace the mission levels pretty easily. Overall, raid mode is a great addition to the main campaign, but like all additional content, it's just a slight distraction, and you will outgrow it. An old staple of Resident Evil games are also the puzzles, and this game delivers in spades. The puzzles might not be overly difficult, and most of them are freaking ridiculous in nature, but they are unique, and a great break in the action. The third episode in particular has almost all the puzzles in the game, but it's also the best episode of the game. This game calls back to the days of Resident Evil 1 where you had an entire mansion full of puzzles with the occasional heavy firefight. It's very refreshing. In Resident Evil Revelations 1, they brought back the feel of the mansion through the Queen Zenobia, and in this game they honor the many death traps waiting to be discovered. It's not a make or break portion of the game, but I do notice it, I appreciate it, and I really hope that they bring this forward into future games. Another great part of the main campaign is the partner system. When you play as Claire and Moira, Claire will run and gun while Moira will just not touch guns. Her fear of guns is later explained in episode 3, but Moira uses a crowbar and a flashlight. The flashlight is used to locate hidden items scattered about your journey. There are also hidden symbols on walls that can only be located under the light, and a fair bit of searching. The crowbar allows Moira to attack with a melee strike that has some potency to it. It also allows you to perform a finishing move after knocking an enemy to the ground. On the other side with Natalia and Barry, the same rules apply. Barry is the walking tank with the ability to use firearms, and Natalia has a few abilities of her own, one of which is to pick up bricks, be able to throw them, and stun or kill enemies. Her secondary ability is the ability to sense enemies through walls, floors, and even some other surprises that I won't spoil for you here. Just know with certain enemies you have to go from Natalia to see them and then switch over to Barry in order to take them down. It's new, it's fresh, and I wish there was so much more of it in this game. The trick is when you run across these enemies later on in the game and you're playing as Claire and Moira and neither one of them can see the enemies. It gets pretty interesting, but you'll figure that out later. When I spoke of puzzles earlier, many of the puzzles involve both the characters and the partner system in the game. If you didn't know what a sluice was before this game, then get ready to have your mind blown. But for this next part, I'm going to throw a tantrum. I'm going to put Capcom into timeout. Why, you ask? Simple. The release of this game was an absolute joke. The episodic content release schedule of this game was the worst part by far. Sure, we can wait until the final release of all the content, but we're gamers. We pre-order by the millions and we stand in line for hours to get a midnight release title so we can come home and play it all night long. We are the majority of the reason why the games industry is the multi-billion-dollar industry that it is. We buy energy drinks by the case. We live, breathe, and die with our favorite characters we've known for decades. So why would we want to wait for one episode to be released every single week for 4 consecutive weeks? What does it accomplish? Well, let me tell you what I think. I think this game wasn't finished. Period. When you play Claire's portion of episode 4, you will complete the episode in roughly 15 minutes. And I'm not even joking. It is that short. Also, we've already discussed the many journals left around that one room in episode 4. This could be attributed to laziness, but I think it had to do with the deadline. And that's my honest opinion, that the game was not ready for mass release on the first episode release day. But when the boss gives you a deadline, I guess you gotta meet it. Sadly, this game suffers for it. Also, the game has 2 major endings. And I will tell you right now that the moment that decides which ending you get is vague as hell. It was shoehorned into the game, and it's completely obvious. I wish they would have held out the multiple scenarios and worked more on the story, because the bad ending and how it happens has nothing to do with the situation that supposedly decides which ending you get. Trust me, it's as confusing to say as it is to experience. That's my conspiracy theory. But back to my reasons why the episodic release was a total cluster. Maybe Capcom believes it added to the anticipation from week to week. Okay, I'll bite. But none of your customers are buying episodes 1 and 3, or 2, 3, and 4. They're going to buy the whole game. So why not give them that? All on one date. I bought this game on Steam for $25, and I feel I totally got my money's worth. At $40, I think I've gotten my money's worth. $60, a little more cloudy. But the point is that I bought the entire game, all at once. Why couldn't I have it all at once? Why would I want to cut out a portion of the story and just focus on anything but the full product? You could say that they wanted to let people try the game before they bought it, but they could have rented it through other means. Capcom's sole mission is to sell product, as is any corporation in this world. To believe otherwise is just foolish and naive. You could also say that they're doing something similar to Telltale games. There's one glaring difference between this and that. Telltale games actually release all of its content with its episodes, and it releases them further apart than just 1 week at a time. And in that regard, it makes them memorable. People anticipate the next episode because they know that the team is hard at work on that episode before they even focus on another. This release schedule lines up as rushed content instead of telltale competition. I wish developers and publishers would understand that delaying a game is a positive, to make it better experience. Most companies are on board with delaying, but others force their product out, and then just has ridiculous day one issues and inconsistent results at best. Hopefully the landscape will continue evolving to what gamers want, and less of what companies can just make money off of because they think we're idiots that'll just buy anything. But if they're doing it for this long, I guess there are idiots out there that'll buy anything. So as we come to the end of our playdate, what does all of my incoherent rambling mean? Let's recap. On the upside, we have raid mode, the puzzles, the partner system, with the big ups, the best thing in the game going to Barry Burton. On the downside, we have the backstory of the villain, multiple endings being decided by a random ass event that has nothing to do with the outcome, and Claire Redfield playing Debbie Downer. I won't get into the release schedule of this game again, I just hope Capcom gives us a completed product next go around. But in the end, did I have fun playing this game? Yes. Sure, I'm a Resident Evil fan who might just fall in line with the overall product, but I had a fun time playing this game, and fun is why we play games in the first place. Was it worth my money? Oh yes. I would say that this is worth a rent. You probably won't buy it until a great sale if you do rent it, but you will be able to experience all the content in a matter of days. And finally, where does this Resident Evil rank amongst the others for me? Well, my personal order is Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil HD, Resident Evil Revelations, and then Resident Evil Revelations 2. I would then fill out my list with Resident Evil 3, Code Veronica, Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil 0, with Resident Evil 6 bringing up the sad, depressing rear of the group. But keep in mind, these are just my opinions. Feel free to drop the mic in the comments below and tell me your list. If you want to, go on ahead and subscribe. I got plenty more videos coming. We got Mortal Kombat X. We got Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin. We got GTA 5 on PC. Next month is going to be Witcher 3. Can't wait for that one. Also, Arkham Knight in June. God, it's going to be a good time to be a gamer. Leave me a thumbs up if you liked me. Leave me a thumbs down. If you did not, it's okay. I can take the criticism. The only thing I want to let you know is thank you for spending part of your day with me. I truly appreciate it. Let the good times roll, and I'll see you next time on AOK Playdate.
Yeah, sorry it took half a year. Fucking technology.
Fucking right up the ass.